turn off my video, but I can't mute myself because then you can't hear me. Just 1 second. Okay, so we're gonna start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go live.
Good morning. My name is Ann Johnson. I will be your moderator for this forum presented by the Coconino County Democratic Party. This is going to be the first of many forums. And so this particular forum features our two Democratic Party mayoral candidates, Paul Deasy and Jamie Whelen. The questions that will be asked were submitted by members of the community. The candidates have not seen these beforehand. One question came in after the 5 o'clock deadline yesterday and will be asked as time permits. If you wish to submit questions through the chat, Ann Heitland will be monitoring those and they will be addressed at the end of the session if we have time. If we don't have time for all the questions, I've just asked permission from Paul and Jamie to ask if they would address those questions, those unanswered questions, and in a written form. And these will be posted in a timely manner. Both of the candidates are very busy in a timely manner, and these will be posted on the CC Dems website. So this is a forum and it's not a debate. Each candidate will be given 2 to 3 minutes to respond to the question. If they wish to rebut a statement from their opponent, they may do so during their next opportunity to speak. So there will not be rebuttals and open debate. The moderator has the right to terminate a response that greatly exceeds the time allotted. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for opening remarks. And alphabetically, we will start with Paul. After Jamie, who will be second in opening remarks, has made her response, then she will be asked the first question, and then Paul will be asked that question too. And then the next question, Paul will get first and Jamie will get second. And I will try to keep up with this and try not to let it be crazy. So we are ready to start. Do either of the candidates have any questions? Okay, so Paul, you are up. Would you please make your opening statements?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you to the Coconino County Democratic Party for putting this on. It's difficult to really get one-on-one, face-to-face with candidates in this day and age. So it's great to be able to answer the questions. I'm Paul Deasy. Well, when I was 12, my family moved to Flagstaff. I graduated from Sanawa High and married my high school sweetheart, Amethyst, who is a nurse that had been fighting on the front line of the COVID pandemic. And we have 4 children together. My eldest, Pierce, my twin 4-year-olds, Bea and Remy, and my baby boy, Eden, at 2. And I want my children to be able to live in a community that is fair and just, where they have the opportunity to pursue their dreams. Now, I've always been involved in politics. I was 9 when I first marched on Washington. At 16, I was helping in voter registration drives here in Flagstaff, earned master's degrees in political science and economics, and I was hired at NAU in 2015, directly after Deasy cut $100 million from the state university system. But the target goals didn't change. My job is to analyze data and advise NAU, ABOR, and the state legislature on how to do more with less in government and better serve the people. Serving the people, to me, means representing their values. Big reason I felt morally obligated to run is yet again our elected leaders, including my opponent, are attempting to undermine the Flagstaff Minimum Wage Citizens Initiative. Last Wednesday, Councilwoman Whelen voted to place on the agenda a measure to stop the minimum wage going to $15 in January. Yet again, an attempt to defeat the voters who have spoken loud and clear twice now. In the midst of recession, social upheaval, and a public health crisis, I am uniquely qualified to be mayor in this time. With the heart of a progressive that better represents the values of the people, with a mind for numbers and economics, whose job it is to advise government institutions on policies to better serve people. I bring the courage, communication skills, energy, and innovative ideas to face our community's issues head on and lead us into a brighter future. Thank you.
Jamie?
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank the Coconino Democratic Party for pulling Paul and I together and having this opportunity to be able to give correct information out and to be able to talk about issues that are in our Flagstaff citizens' heart. You know, one of the things, I have been in Flagstaff for over 30 years. I have been an educator for 36 years, both at NAU and within the Flagstaff School District. I'm a mom, I'm a grandma, I'm a wife, I'm a private business owner, and I also am an employer and an employee. I have been your vice mayor for 2 years. I have been on council for 4. And it gives me great joy to have this opportunity to sit beside Paul and allow our differences and our similarities to come out. So I look forward to that. What I can offer the community, what I have offered the community is strength, a commitment to serve, a listener. You know, what I believe is that strong communities navigate things better, and we get good results from that. So you will rarely see me turn down a community discussion, as I did last Tuesday. And by no means was that a fair item to stop any minimum wage. Again, need to let you know, minimum wage is a law and it will happen. And the voters, time and time again, have said, this is what we want to happen. So rest assured, it will happen. The only way it could be different is if the voters would vote again and change that citizens' initiative. So I hope that's clear. And as mayor, I certainly honor that. I have never been against the minimum wage. I have been against how it was crafted and created. So with that said, I'd just like to let you know that what I do offer this community is experience, not only from being an educator for 36 years and a facilitator and a listener, but I also offer you the experience of being in government, understanding what it is to be a policymaker rather than someone that perhaps analyzes data, which is very different. And I've got to say, in my own experience, being first on council, I think if you ask any council member, it takes a good first year to understand the difference between being a candidate or being an employee versus being a leader and a representative of our community. That I can offer you.
Thank you very much for your response. All right, so our first question is, and this question goes to Jamie. What are your plans to deal with the impact of the downsizing at Northern Arizona University on the Flagstaff community, the city tax base, and the housing market?
Well, again, coming from there, I did get my degrees from NAU. I was employed at NAU, nominated as Teacher of the Year at NAU. And I grieve with what is going on at NAU. How could we have ever known that this would happen? You know, we have brilliant individuals who are now being displaced. I just heard of a dear friend who had been up there for 16 years, just lost her job. And that is happening time and time again. I want you to rest assured that since October, we have been working on a recession plan that we have fully anticipated what was needed and what our community will need. And while I understand that I believe it was doing less in government, this is a time where you're going to find leaders that need to do more in government. And that's one of the reasons that we shifted to a priority-based budgeting. And so we can earmark monies as time goes on and as community decisions or community wants change. So I think it's very important. We're going to stand beside anyone who is displaced or furloughed. One of the huge economic drivers that we have to look forward to is beginning to offer other opportunities and bring more education to our community. And so those are some of the things that I believe that we are already have in works for our community in our shifting times.
Thank you. Paul, what are your plans to deal with the impact of downsizing at NAU on the Flagstaff economy, the city tax base, and the housing market?
Thank you for the question. So first of all, many of those that were laid off are the people that I went to lunch with who work across the hall from me at NAU. I personally would have rather taken a larger pay cut so that people could keep their jobs. But the NAU's decisions are certainly not under the jurisdiction of the city of Flagstaff. But yes, again, we have to be mindful and help our community members who are displaced by this situation. I think we're very fortunate to have City Manager Clifton, who last fall had prepared the recession plan in preparation of what's going on. And I think the city is well on its way managed financially in preparation with City Manager Clifton's leadership. Now, we are going to have to be making some very difficult decisions, right? We are expecting up to a 30% cut in our tax base with the general fund. And I think what we need to do is ensure that we are communicating with the public, ensuring they have input on what these hard decisions we have to make to ensure we're moving forward in a way that though through difficult times, we are still representing the people. And regarding the housing market, we are going to be in some difficult times when it comes to this, especially when people are not nearly as economically well off. And we may be seeing and likely seeing a very large rise in our homeless population. So again, we need to make sure that we are taking care of the people who are most disaffected and help them navigate this difficult time so that way they can get back on their feet and have the economic opportunities in our community that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So you get the next question, which is related. Given the fact that the best case scenario for the economy are an 18-month to 2-year significant recession with unemployment at higher levels than we've seen since the 1930s, do you believe that the city staff's plan for budget reductions in stages is adequate, and how would you change it, if at all?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, we're going to be experiencing a pretty heavy recession right now. Actually, the Brookings Institution put out a report that Flagstaff is expected to be the 10th hardest hit city for employment in the nation. And that could be looking at even depression level. So this is the reality of the situation that we have to recognize. And in the midst of this, I think we do have decent strategic planning, but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty tactical level, which typically is very much in the hands of our city manager, but we need to be able to look through our budget. I'm used to looking through $300 million budgets and saying 5,000 here, 20,000 there, 13,000, and coming up with innovative ideas on how to navigate this situation without as affecting our labor force in city government. And that's what it's going to have to be. You know, tightening a belt is a pretty cliche term, but really looking at the nitty-gritty details of ways to approach this situation, I think is important, and especially where the actual target is likely to be. So yes, we're doing this gradual aspect, but when we start planning at the little nitty-gritty level, we need to focus on, I think, that 20% level of cuts, so that way we have a full plan for departmental level and divisional level. And I know that a lot of that is going on with our city staff, and they're preparing and they are qualified to do so. So, but it's also council's role to make sure that still represents the people, as well as to provide the innovative ideas that can help us, you know, try some new things. And I've navigated now budget cuts 4 times. I've dealt with major budget cuts and restructures in higher education. And it does take a lot of innovation to ensure that we move forward in a way that betters the people that we are serving. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So Jamie, do you believe that the city staff's plan for budget reductions in stages is adequate, and how would you change it, if at all?
Thank you, Ann. Absolutely. You know, when that first came across the table, I had looked at the impacts that this same type of plan was used in another city in Colorado. And so I wanted to make sure that any bumps in the road that they had felt in 2008 were able to be flexible and fluid enough. And they were, and it's a great plan. And as we said before, this started in October in anticipation. I'd like to say that it is council's job to get in the weeds, but it's not. It's council's job to give direction that comes from the community to the city manager, and then the city manager is responsible. This is a council city manager form of government. And it's very important that council members, mayors, not get in the weeds, because it creates a triangulation, and it's not helpful. We have excellent staff right now. We have excellent leadership, and it's brand new. Our city manager, Greg Clifton, has been with us for a year, and he has made major changes. Again, the council gives direction based on community voice and who we represent, because there are 7 of us. The mayor is just 1 vote, but the mayor also has the responsibility of facilitating those conversations, making sure those voices get out and listened to. So, you know, are we ready? Absolutely, we're ready. We are fluid, we are nimble, and many people looked at our budget and said, oh my gosh, that's a high budget. But again, we have to budget for the highest. And through our recession plan, it places a lens that as things change, and they will, we are nimble enough to change with them. So I feel very, very confident in the plan that we have.
Thank you so much for your response. So now you get the next question. We all recognize that Governor Deasy has taken away most of the power of cities related to the COVID pandemic. Still, do you think the mayor and the current council are doing as much as they can to protect the population? If not, what else do you think that they should be doing? Do you think that the council has been effective in how it is communicating or not with the public about the COVID crisis? Jamie.
You know, it's a great question, and herein lies the difference of government systems. So we have a county health department, which is an extension of the state health department. And they are giving messages out that align with state, align with the governor. And I'm so glad this has come to the surface. I don't like that it has come to the surface around COVID, because you know, COVID is something that, again, strong communities navigate things together. And what is beginning to happen is that when our home rule is taken away, like we saw in COVID, that communities no longer have a voice. Even though our mayor was working very hard in meeting with other mayors and meeting with Governor Deasy's staff and fighting hard for keeping our communities safe, we are so different in northern Arizona that it really does become, and that's why we have local government. So we need to work side by side with the county and with what their plans are and their testing, and we've supported them, and they've done a good job, and we're always trying to do better. Each government agency is always trying to do better. I think rather than making a decision, Governor Deasy kicked it back to the individuals in the councils and governments that need to make the decision. Do I think we can do more? As soon as we find out what we need to do, you see that we are nimble enough to do it. So as soon as that power was restored to the mayor, we had the mask resolution. So we are constantly getting information from all scientific avenues that we possibly can, and health organizations weighing that information and trying to set policy when we're allowed to face our next challenge. But again, I believe that one of the things of getting what happens when power is taken away from local municipalities is definitely on the forefront here, and it happens consistently through in my 4 years. So it's something I ask everyone to please keep an eye on, and to elect officials that aren't so easily swayed to take away powers of local governments. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Paul, do you want the question repeated?
Yes, please.
Okay, so how do you think that the city council and the mayor are handling the COVID crisis, since Governor Deasy has blocked a lot of stuff? How effective do you think they are in communicating what they're doing?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, first, I would like to commend and thank Mayor Evans for having taken the leadership even before Deasy to close down and protect our public health here locally. What I feel has been lacking is a matter of communication. We are a very individualistic, independent society, and telling the people just what to do rather than a why to do it, and what is the purpose of certain guidelines, and making sure those guidelines are very well put forth, is absolutely needed. Because when information is not provided and communication not provided on the why, then it's going to be filled with a vacuum of misinformation. And we are seeing that. We are seeing people resistant to the masks and so forth, mainly, I think, because they don't understand what it is they're doing, that it's not to protect yourself, it's to protect somebody else. Your mask protects, my mask protects you, your mask protects me. And understanding some very clear guidelines and so forth that'll be put forth is extremely, extremely important right now. We can't just sit out a executive order and expect everyone to follow it, especially when a lot of these have, you know, difficulties with enforcement. So that being said, in some, I do think that in some ways the council has handled the situation appropriately, mainly the mayor, but the lack of communication is led to misinformation and has led to less people actually following what is being stated.
Thank you, Paul. And now you get the next question. What, if anything, can be done to make housing more affordable in Flagstaff?
Thank you. Very good question. The one thing that we have is our development incentives. 10 years ago, we had a list of what actually incentivizes private businesses and developers to create actual affordable housing. I'll give you an example. When you get 10% of affordable housing in a development, you can cut down more trees. Now, these incentives obviously don't seem to be working very well or for their intended purpose. So we really need to look at how our development incentives are structured, and we need to look at our fees and what we're costing that also passes on to the consumer, as well as try to think through some more potential innovative ideas that other cities have used. For example, a land value tax rather to replace part of our property tax. That is used, it reduces land speculation. It allows for, basically you are taxed on the value of your land, not on the property you build on it. And this gives a different incentive structure for development, for infill, for turning garages into extra bedrooms and putting a tiny house in their backyard and whatnot without increasing their property taxes. So I think we need to really look at our incentives, our fees, and our tax structure to see if there may be better ways to handling it that we have seen in other cities be effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jamie, what, if anything, can be done to make housing more affordable in Flagstaff?
Well, I must agree with Paul. Some of our incentives almost go, not against, but certainly aren't part of the things that we value. So it almost is as if we're working against what the community values. I've got to say, we have worked very hard on changing things, to change zoning, to make the process more expedited. You know, Real Estate 101 says if you have more inventory, it costs less. And so, you know, our community is this beautiful community, but we also have these different thoughts in the community. We have open space, environment. We have individuals who prioritize workforce housing and affordable housing. And then we have parts of the community that says no more growth, no more growth. What's important to me is that all the voices come together for solutions. What we are looking at now is opening new areas of Flagstaff where that would pull transportation out of the center of town and allow for more housing to be made. But every time I talk about property rights and property values and how they're so protected in Arizona. For example, council just approved, and we have more coming up, the idea of no more 6-story buildings in historic neighborhoods. And almost immediately what we were faced with was a 207 claim that said, you just devalued my property X millions of dollars. And then council needed to make a decision whether to waive, whether to go to court, or whether to pay the $2 million. So we have a community thought of we've got to protect our neighborhoods, our historic neighborhoods, but then when we take action, it takes more taxpayers' money if we're going to stick with it. Affordable housing has always been a priority for me. Workforce housing has always been a priority for me, and it will continue. And that's at all levels. That's for the unhomed, that's for rapid housing, that's for down payment assistance, land trust. We have all of those things right now working. Some effectively, some need to be tuned.
Thank you so much. So next question is kind of in the same vein. And it says, what is your opinion on the Milltown Mcgrath property use for student housing? And how will you vote on future requests for such developments? Jamie.
So, you know, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because Milltown was a three-way partnership, as I said before. It was a partnership with the state, ADOT. It was a partnership with the city, and it was a partnership, a private partnership. And what happened is, in order to have city interests done, the partnership was a good idea, and that meant having university come through so we would be able to take care of our traffic and transit challenges, having Beulah come through also. We also saw that ADOT needed to be moved, and they expanded our movie theater. So all of those things were working in conjunction. You couldn't just say, and it's against the law, you can't just say student housing, no. But when CUPs come around, they come before council, and you'll see that negotiation. So we negotiated for more housing for elders. We negotiated the different sizes. We negotiated all of those things. And the truth of the matter, when it came back, we have to base our decision on findings, not what our heart is saying, but on actual findings. And those findings are very specific. And so when you have your Planning and Zoning Commission said all the findings are met, you have your staff saying everything is met, then it really is to just say, no, I don't want you here, is against the law, and you can't do that. Now, on the surface, I can see all this misunderstanding, and I want to bring you up to date. That housing or development has reduced 30 to 40%. So, and again, experience says that in a process of developing a piece of land, because it takes years, things change. And so that property, even though the partnerships have been met, and Flagstaff will get roadways, will get transit lines, it has reduced in size. So those are important things to remember.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Paul. Okay, Paul, what are your thoughts on the Milltown Mcgrath project, and how would you vote on future such developments?
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is a very clear divide between myself and Councilwoman Whelen. Yeah, yes, we can't stop all student housing, but we can stop rezoning for student housing. And the Milltown project is huge. It's twice the size of the hub, and it's going right at the entrance of our town. So instead of coming into town, the first impression is going to be a giant monstrosity right on Milton. Now, I wanted to just point out that a little quote from Randy Wilson, or the late Randy Wilson, the editor of the paper. He stated in an editorial, when Vice Mayor Jamie Whelen, who campaigned in 2016 almost exclusively on a No More Hubs platform, gushes that Milltown is way ahead of its time, and she supports it, quote, wholeheartedly, you start wondering how much bigger the next Milltown will be. This is a clear divide between, I would not have voted to rezone for the Milltown project, and especially with reduced enrollment and everything going down, I don't think we should be rezoning for student housing. Do we always have the option? No. Council's hands are tied quite heavily a lot of the time. But when we've seen it come up, when we have the ability to do something about it, I don't feel that these votes represent the will of the people that tell us time and time again, enough is enough with student housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Paul, you get the next question.
Mm-hmm.
What are the two most important things the council and the Board of Supervisors need to work on together?
That's a good question. What comes to mind, number one, is ensuring our watershed protection program and continuing to work with the county to thin the forest around us and help protect our city with the county's assistance, and ensure that, I mean, a lot of the FWPP goes into the county, like down south, rather than just within city limits, to make sure that there isn't a giant fire that puts all the debris and ashes into our water supply. So it is extremely important we continue on that, thinning the forest. Obviously, the museum fire last summer, we always are going to face this. The second thing I would say that we need to work with the county on, and especially in this day and age, is criminal justice. So the county runs the jail. It's the county attorney's office and so forth that deals with the criminal justice system. But we really, with the voice of the people out there, need to work cohesively with both the city and the county to ensure that our criminal justice system goes in a manner and treats everyone in our society equitably, and move forward with the county on these two issues, the FWPP and criminal justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie, what do you think that the issues are that the county and the city need to work on?
So thank you for the question. I am going to take a minute and go back to Milltown and Mcgrath. Number one, NAU, COVID, census dropping was not even in the mix at that time. Remember, it takes years and years to make decisions like this. Rezoning for housing is something that I understand you think that we're able to change, and we are changing it, but you know, it's taken 4 years to change it. Just before council, we have things coming up that would change renting by the bed, that would change the makeup of how many bedrooms per unit. So those things are being done. They really are. And this is a difference I want you to think about in leadership. I come from a place of 4 years of understanding what is already going, the direction that it's going in, seeing the need for community voice. And, you know, I was in your seat. Being a candidate, you have no clue what is going on. So if you think that when you elect a mayor, you have time to get that mayor up to speed for a year, then therein lies your vote. If you think that what we need right now is calm, measured, experienced, competent, then that is your vote. So being competent is being able to already know what is going on. We have council members who are running for office, who have been at every council meeting, who understands the nuances that have been going on. That I think is important. So when you speak, you at least know what is going on. Now back to the county. You know, we need to walk side by side with the county because we are the municipality within the county. Paul, you brought up some great issues. County has not helped in any of our FWPP. That was decided by a bond and a vote by the people that we would go into county and national forests and take action for our own protection. Council has just passed 2 issues that will align monies and adjusted rates, the environmental rates, so those could go to protect our Boorman Mountain, our Lake Mary watershed. So it's very important. Now we have a revenue stream that will be consistent. Do we still get grants to increase that revenue stream? Of course we do. We can do more. But the things, you know, flood district, the county just came to the city and said, you know what, we're going to take your flood district monies away and we're going to control them, which is a huge concern of the city of Flagstaff and of other cities. So working together in every aspect, working together in homing individuals who are unhomed, working together for services for COVID, all of those things, housing, we just allotted more money to the county for housing concerns. Very important that we work together, and I think we could do much better at that.
Thank you for your answer. So the next question, Jamie. The council recently considered whether to declare a climate emergency. What does that mean to you, and would you vote for the pending proposal?
Absolutely, no doubt in my mind. I supported it. I think it's very important that we make that statement and that we get it on the books, that we believe that we are in a climate emergency. You know, staff has brought forth this amazing plan that has guided actions of the council, and our commissions and committees have also funneled that information in, and I don't believe we need to stop. And in fact, several times I have asked that this be put back on the agenda, whether we're in person or not. It is something that needs to be done and needs to be done yesterday, quite frankly, because we are in a climate emergency. And so I will ask again that it come back to council and move forward.
Thank you. Paul, how would you deal with the climate emergency and the proposal that's pending?
Thank you. I fully support the climate emergency declaration. I did speak up in council chambers the first time around to push my support, as well as urge council to also start taking the next steps. You know, recognizing you have a problem is only the first step of the 12-step program. So this is the first step, and I think it's extremely important. We have a climate action and adaptation plan, and I really am glad that we pursued this. But again, it comes into implementation and actually following through, because both of these documents are non-binding. It's a non-binding resolution, and the climate action and adaptation plan does not have legal force. It sets goals for the most part. And we need to make sure that we continue the steps, keep acting as we that it is a climate emergency. So, I mean, it's all about the follow through. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Paul, the Black Lives Matter movement nationally has touched a chord in small cities across the country, including Flagstaff. Here in Flagstaff, The movement is concerned not only with police brutality against African Americans, but also with racism as it affects our Native American and Latino communities. What has been your involvement with this movement, and what do you think the city, how do you think the city should respond, if it should?
Thank you for that question, Anne. I was at one of the marches early on, and have seen a lot of people very frustrated with council and with how the situation has been handled based on communication. It's the communication that has been missing, quite frankly. And looking and talking with the BLM leaders and so forth, and others, they feel silence. We have the largest protests in Flagstaff's history. Over 1,000 people coming out. They're coming out because they feel unheard. And yet again, recently, we saw and council, kept the budget as is, added a line on there for implicit bias training or education for the police, and then punted the ball to community organizations to have to deal with. And I see this kind of like how Deasy did with the masks. He's punting responsibility, when I feel that it's our elected leaders' job to help navigate these situations. It's also important that the others are leading this conversation, but council really needs to be listening better and responding better to what is very clearly an extremely important issue for our community.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thank you so much for this. Communication has come up several times, and I agree, we could do better at communicating. But what you need to understand, that when you communicate as a city or as a council, the message needs to be certain. It's not like a Facebook post that you can just throw something up and get conversation. It needs to be vetted legally. It needs to be all of those things. And the one thing that we need to make sure of is that we give a clear, concise message. And so that takes time. Now, as Black Lives Matter was unfolding, and I also participated in the march, we were in conversation that Black communities needed to get together and they needed time to talk. So we couldn't come out with a statement without waiting for our community members to get organized and to have that time to process what was going on and talk about what was going on. And so once we got that letter, once we got that intent, then we didn't push anything off. We spent until 3 o'clock in the morning listening to community. And the next time we met, we spent 5 hours listening to community. You're right. What you did not get is action, because that would have been action from a group of people that really have not said, I understand the problem. We need to be able to pledge to create the space. That's what the city gets to do. They get to pledge to create that space. They get to pledge to listen, just as we did in the Indigenous circle. And then once the recommendations come back, we get to pledge that we will take action on them. But to come out and just make blatant statements, and I've got to tell you, that's why COVID has been so confusing. Statements are coming from all over. As a city leader, you have got to wait. You have got to take the time to listen before you come out with a blatant statement. And, for the most part, our community understands that. It's not a Facebook post. And therein lies the difference of experience.
Thank you. Thank you. So in future budgets, Jamie, would you redistribute money from the Flagstaff Police Department to fund other social services that are tremendously lacking in our city? If you do not support this, why and how would you propose further funding essential to social services?
Again, when I first sat on council, you know, going through 4 budgets, you get a lot of vision and you understand what was going on. Basically, I came onto council and we were doing a base budget with pretty much knee-jerk increments, which meant that all the departments were growing. They might not have been growing aligned to community values, but they were growing because it was more of an inside decision. I spoke with our city manager at that time, Barbara Goodrich, and we began to talk about other ways of budgeting. And from then we moved to a priority-based budgeting, which means that the budget is based on community priorities. So it's not just base budget, everybody gets a raise. It is, what is the community saying? What do we already have? And how can we better allocate our monies to get things done that the community wants to? And so that is being instituted. It was instituted at the beginning of this year and is moving forward. And I think in our second year of it, we will be able to see more and more things. So to answer your question, I believe that what we need to do is hear from all the stakeholders. And I believe that those stakeholders will come up with recommendations, and that's the community voice. The police, the fire, they're all included in that voice. If it means demilitarizing the police, quite frankly, I'm with that. If it means getting rid of certain chokeholds, I would like to see that done immediately. But what we're talking about is reallocating funds. And absolutely, any department, any piece of the city should know that that is one of the options that the council get to do based on community voice. So I hope I answered your question, Ann.
I think so. So Paul, would you like to address the future budget and the Flagstaff Police Department using those funds to support social service agencies?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Well, we're seeing a lot of this in other cities, a lot of what's going on. Albuquerque just recently did so. But I would like to point out that council has yet to have a single member put a fair item, a future action or future agenda item request on the agenda to discuss this. So I hear from Councilwoman Whelen a lot about communication and we need to have a discussion. Well, there has not been anything extra placed on the agenda to have these formal discussions. Yes, they did have the budget session, and that was already on there before the BLM protest started. But I find that it's kind of backwards when we're talking about community and discussion, that we even haven't had a formal discussion, nor one individual and member of council to put a fair on, and then it takes 3 after that to fully place it on the agenda, 3 members. So regarding that though, this is very worthy of discussion. Obviously, with protests all over, and looking at the model that we are utilizing here locally. So we have examples of Camden, New Jersey, Eugene, Oregon, that are using, that are, instead of sending police officers to everyone to public intoxications, issues of homelessness, instead they're seeing a single unit of a social worker and a medic that then are in the vehicle and respond to these types of calls, who are are equipped and know how to handle these situations very well. This also, one thing that needs to be mentioned is can be very cost efficient to do this. So right now, a lot of these calls you have a police, fire, and ambulance respond to. That's 3 vehicles and 4 people going to a call. Wouldn't we want to really talk about this also in a cost efficiency manner? That now with that type of system, you only need 1 vehicle and 2 people responding to these calls. And I mean, we have Catholic Social Services here that in the winter will help and get the homeless and get them sheltered and a hot meal to protect them. It's not unheard of that we have to be handling a lot of these situations from more of a social program as opposed to a enforcement and criminal law enforcement handling. So, thank you.
Thank you. And the next question is yours, Paul. How did we get to a point where the pension plan is unfunded? The liability is of great concern to the financial well-being of the city. So what do you feel about the recent decision to consider refinancing that liability?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, you know, the city manager came up with a plan for our refinancing of the pension debt, which, you know, as somebody who works government staff, that is exactly their approach and a great way to do so. Why should we pay 7+% interest when we can pay 4 to 5% interest? How we got here actually was partially due to the state, and during the financial crisis had put a lot of these pensions in very high risk investments. And then that snowballed due to many years of neglect for paying and getting that paid down over the last 12 years. So it snowballed from the state, and then it kept snowballing into our city, and inevitably we're the ones who are liable for it, even if we're not managing the money. Regardless, right now we had $122 million refinance to mortgage all of a lot of our city properties, essentially refinancing with the collateral. But I think this is the right approach, but we need to be very careful because also, just because this part is funded, we have the unfunded pension liability, we have the funded pension liability. Part of the problem is we weren't making the funded pension liability payments either. And we need to be very, very careful that we're not just gonna dig ourselves another hole. I know that from watching meetings that Councilwoman Whelen is already even suggesting using our use tax and so forth and diverting those funds that were previously going to our pension. And I think if that's the type of discussion we're going to be having, we just need to be very careful, numbers oriented, understanding how government operations work and dollar amounts and how to reallocate to ensure that we're not going to just dig ourselves another hole. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Jamie, you need to unmute yourself.
I've
There.
got myself
Okay.
unmuted. Thank
Okay.
you. I'm very excited about what council has done. And let me give you a little history about that. Again, I've sat through many a budget and it had been status quo, status quo. And as I said in the other discussion that, you know, Charlie Odegaard really had a voice here, and he kept on saying, we need to move on this. We need to go from 35% unfunded, paying unfunded liability. We need to increase that number. So he and Council Member Salas and myself had a meeting with Michael Townsend at the county, and our finance director came with us. And at that point, we began to understand that there was a solution. And from that, it took about 1 year to put that solution into action. So again, we have funded our entire unfunded liability. I need to help you with some information. There was never a time that we did not pay our principal payment on our pension. what was happening is because the rates were higher on the unfunded liability, that was increasing, and it was taking $50 to $70 million out of general fund, which general fund is the one that is allocated and has that flexibility in it. We also keep a 20% general fund balance. Taking upon this debt, we have an A++ minus rating, which is an excellent rating for cities. We have also instituted a contingency plan. So if things shift, we already have monies that would be able to carry us through should recession, depression hit hard. So this is planned out in so many levels. And it was through that initial communication of, I'm going to find out the answer and let's move this forward. So I'm very excited about that. I know you brought up the use of, or the user's tax. That was instated last year, that a user's tax would be happening to our businesses here in Flagstaff. That generated about $800,000. The reason that I had brought it up when we were talking about unsheltered and social services and funding was there an ability to shift some of those user funds into more social service? And that was the question that I brought up. And you'll find that you'll have that ability when you sit on council to ask those questions and to think outside the box. Council decision was not to touch that money because, again, as a council member, as a mayor, we have one vote. Every decision is made by majority. It's not one person running the show. It is about group, it's about collaboration, it's about listening, and it is about working together to come to a common good. So thank you.
Thank you. So the next question, Jamie, comment on how you see public transportation evolving in Flagstaff.
Great question. And as chair of the NAPDA or Mountain Line Board of Directors for, I think it's been 2 years, going into my 3rd year, I would love to answer this. You know, before we were at a point where it's a well-run organization. I've just got to say that. And the board has just decided to offer Heather Whelen, who is our CEO and general manager, a permanent position. She has just done a fine job. Kate Morley is her deputy. And what teamwork is going on there? They've brought in over $52 million, $54 million to increase and to build a downtown connection center. Talk about the climate adaptation, action and adaptation plan. Just at our last meeting, we were talking about when do we make that shift based on that plan? How do we bring emissions into line? And we're looking at those future repercussions when we begin to bring battery run buses or whatever the board sees fit, but we are reducing those emissions. So it's an important piece, and Mountain Line has done an exceptional job under the past leaders and under the leadership now. What we missed in our last budget was, in our last bond ask, was bus rapid transit. Now we all know that buses that run on a 30-minute line don't get as much activity as those that run every 15 minutes that you can walk outside your door and grab a bus. So that is one of the goals that we still have to bring to the people of Flagstaff. And that makes the accessibility much easier and much better. Right now, we are running a system that is free because of COVID, because of getting essential workers to where they need to be. Could we increase hours when things get stable and increase that rapid transit? Yes, there are many things we can do. But also in the meantime, we can begin to plan our roads for bike ped. We can begin to plan bus lanes or even integrated signals that get people to where they want to be. But the impact with NAU and the impact with our community is huge and needs to keep the momentum going. And I think we'll find that with maybe another bond measure in 2 years, or perhaps asking the people what they'd like to do. And that's what a bond measure is about anyway. But very exciting things happening.
Thank you very much. Paul, would you like to comment on the public transportation evolving in Flagstaff?
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted to go back real quick to the pension debt. Councilwoman Whelen said that we have an A++ minus bond, and I think this is the second time I've heard her say this. It is a double A+. That is what our bond, and especially, with me, I have 9 years experience working in public policy, working in large higher education institutions, the same size as the city. And it's very, very important, especially when we're talking about really other people's money.
So it is an AA minus, Paul.
Excuse me.
It's not an AA plus.
I think it's my turn to speak here, Councilwoman Whelen.
Right.
So I would like to get to the question of public transportation. Regarding public transportation, NAPTA has done a lot of great work. And I think and the city council too, and getting more into a multimodal type of transportation, which we have tested and seen here locally. But one thing actually that I like recently that was presented by the Downtown Business Alliance was to close down the roads downtown to make more room for people to go out to eat and be outside and safer. I think that is a really good idea. And maybe let's see if that's something that we could use more of going forward. I mean, Denver, Colorado closed down their main downtown street that turned it all into multimodal transportation. And it is great. It's actually reduced traffic issues in downtown Denver. So I think it's a great test case, actually, if this might be a mode to be able to pursue. So I would like to look at that. One other thing was that our sales tax that we voted on 2 years ago, that's going to be building the J.W. Powell from the airport to 4th Street, et cetera. Well, only 10% of that money of the sales tax was designated for our bikes or for bicycles and other types of transportation like that. So I think it would be good in the future for us to really tag more money when we do go to the voters for approval for sales tax, et cetera. Though it's going to be a while now that we just voted it in. I think we should be more mindful when we set up these numbers and look through the dollar amounts and what we can do about it, that we designated more for our bicycle lanes and public transit. Thank you.
Thank you. So Paul, you get the next question. Residential water users in Flagstaff are subject to a rate structure that incentivizes water conservation. Do you support or oppose creating a rate structure for commercial water users that also incentivizes water conservation?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, water is a big deal in our community. And I think it is absolutely worthy of discussion, placing on the agenda to see if we would like to do a more tiered system with our commercial rates, such that the more you use, the more you're going to be spending per gallon. But as somebody who is very evidence-based and likes numbers and likes digging through these things, I would like to see what city staff, what their input is on our water usage and what this tiered system would look like. I know we've did that a few years ago in 2014, that it was discussed to do some of the tier system, but I find it actually one thing that people don't realize is actually, so commercial rates are flat for most of our commercial, commercial water use, except when it comes to reclaimed water, especially for our golf courses. It's actually inverted, which I find very strange, that they're spending $1.38, I believe, per 10,000 gallons, up to 150 million gallons. And after 150 million gallons, that's a lot of water, then they actually get a rate reduction to $1.07. That seems really backwards to me. So I think this is something that's extremely important that we need to get more information and evidence to see how those rates would change our conservation efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie, would you like to comment on the water usage?
I sure would. And absolutely, we're already in a rate study. On all those levels, council realized that the recycled water was not studied, and exactly what you said, Paul. So we already have action on that. Water is so important, and as I said before, I am the vice chair of the NAMWA, which is Northern Arizona Municipal Water Users Association. So that's a group of staff members and elected officials that are in constant communication and watching the bills that the legislature has brought through. And I've got to tell you, before the legislature shut down, there were over, I think, 50 bills that would regulate water rights, and not to the benefit of Northern Arizona. So I am a member of that. I am also on the council liaison of the Water Commission, who is working very hard along with staff to bring those studies to fruition so that council can make good decisions on our future. The one thing that Flagstaff has agreed with and insisted on is that we would be part of the adequate water supply designation, which means every moment we are planning 100 years out on how to use water. And there's so many innovative things that are coming. Now, Flagstaff is the only water user in Northern Arizona that is part of that. We would love to see our neighboring cities to also be part of that. Every 10 years, we go through a review of are we on the right track? Are our numbers correct? So all of those things are already in place and being acted upon. And just to go back to the other question about that visioning of or closing down roads, council and Downtown Business Alliance and other stakeholders are already in a visioning plan to make permanent adjustments according to that plan. But right now it's come before council. Can we shut those areas down to help local business? So that it is on the table. But again, you know, I would like to say it comes to the table and then it's decided on. And because we really respect and want community participation, it has to go through that process of work session, you know, those kinds of things. So it does take time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next question, Jamie. The needs and desires of local business owners and the needs and desires of non-business owner residents are often at odds. Yet each side is equally an essential and valued element of our community. How can we serve and satisfy both parties without pitting them or their needs and desires against each other?
What a great question. And I've got to tell you, I am not so sure why we even talk about sides. But I have a sense that it initiated from the lack of discussion, community discussion. And I've got to tell you, we are getting better and better and better at community discussion and community forums and things like that. And I really think we need to come together to talk about those uncomfortable things. You know, when you ask small business owners, they were paying above minimum wage when 414 came. Most of them were. And so those discussions just were never had. We have to walk side by side together in this. And as I've been saying time and time again, our strength is the joining of all these beautiful parts of Flagstaff. It is not about being divisive and saying you're wrong, you're right, it is about let's listen and let's make decisions based on the entire community. So we don't have to waste our time in this fear and struggle that is being put up for grabs, and people bite on that. Nothing is decided without community conversation unless it's an administrative decision. And that is typically based, as we've seen time and time again with our city manager, brings those things right out and as transparent as possible, saying, hey, this is coming up. I need to decide on it. I want to hear what you have to say. So before we have found that that was not happening, this council and the leadership under Mayor Coral Evans has changed those things. Do we get to be better? Sure. Does our community get to be better? Sure. But we really are stronger together. And I would only hope that we have the courage to sit down together and really decide what is it and what direction do we want to go in. Because time and time again, you have seen that under this leadership, current leadership, and under my leadership, that is how we gain direction, and council listens.
Thank you. Paul, how do we serve and satisfy all areas of the community without pitting them against each other?
Yes, thank you for the question. You know, we're all economically we're all in together. We're integrative. The people who get their minimum wage increase are now spending more money in the economy, which also goes more money in with the business owners. And I also agree with Councilwoman Whelen that these divisions aren't necessary. Now, though the thing is that you did mention that, oh, these businesses were already paying these wages above minimum wage. That is absolutely not true. I, at the time, was serving tables for a time span right in between getting hired at NAU and being with the National Science Foundation as a research fellow. During that time, I was being paid minimum wage. When I had to host to move up to the server, I was paid minimum wage. And I will tell you, no, they are about a quarter of our entire city was being paid minimum wage at $8.05 an hour to do what they do. And that was why I supported and moved forward with the minimum wage law. So I do want to mention one thing, because I do hear a lot about this whole communication. We're doing great at it. Well, I want to mention just one project, our Rio de Flag project going on right now. Individuals had to actually even sue the city because they illegally did not provide public notification And council got lots of emails and so forth from people who are going to get their land taken to be able to deal with the Rio de Flag project without much of a response. Actually, that's why they had to go and sue to be able to get the proper public notifications. To this day, the individuals who are disaffected by the Rio de Flag project still don't know how high the wall is going to be in their backyard, the land that was declared with eminent domain. So they don't know if it's going to be 5 feet or 15 feet tall. I continuously find lots of breakdowns in communications and things that people are reaching out to me to discuss because they want change with the communications and the way that they are being heard by the current city council. So, thank you.
Thank you. So, Paul, what would you do about decriminalizing survival in our community, such as public camping ordinance and other measures that criminalize sleeping in Flagstaff?
Thank you. Yes. In my mind, sleeping unto itself should not be a crime. Right now, under the anti-camping ordinance, you can be arrested for sleeping. We have laws already in place for a lot of the things that this was supposed to be intended for, like, public intoxication. We already have a law on that. We already have laws for littering. And I know and understand that this gives a little oomph to be a little more preemptive, but I don't think just sleeping, especially in this time when we're going to face an economic recession, when homelessness, especially once the executive orders go for not having to pay rent, and come September, we're going to see a lot of homeless. And to now make them all criminals, I think is not the right approach, and that needs to be delved into. Again, we continuously see the anti-camping ordinance presented in front of council. We go back to it every few years, and it's still been in place since, 2006 was when Al White was on council. I feel that we already have laws in place to deal with some of the next negative social externalities of, people being out intoxicated and so forth, that it is unnecessary to be criminalizing homelessness in our city, criminalizing sleeping. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thank you. Just to set the record straight, there is no public intoxication law. So you can't be arrested because you're intoxicated. And I find that odd, but it's true. The answer to homelessness is homes. The answer to homelessness is being homed, is rapid housing, is what Catholic Social Services, the Flagstaff shelter, the missions are working on every minute of every day. It is not about providing space to be unhomed. Now, we are surrounded by national forests, which anyone can go in and camp for an extended period of time, and then they can move their campsite and move. So it is not like that opportunity is not available. I don't believe that there's an ordinance that you can't sleep in Flagstaff. I think what the ordinance talks about, Paul, is about having the equipment of camping. I've fallen asleep in the parks. No one's going to get arrested for that. So I just want to clear those things up. One of the things, and even you talked about it, is public safety and wildfires. And if this is one of the ways that we can help support getting people homed and keeping our community safe, you can tell that community and councils have repeatedly supported this ordinance. It is not about not wanting people to be homed or not wanting people to have the right to have their own camps. But we have special squads that have to maintain constant constant communication with individuals that are camping within the city limits to keep the city fire safe. So it's not about the individual, it's truly about the safety. And that is why council time and time again support homing the unhomed, should they want to be. And if they do not want to be, then they certainly have the right to go outside the city limits and camp. It's not a personal issue, it's a safety issue. And it's about getting individuals into homes. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Now we have 4 minutes left in this forum. So I'm going to ask you this final question and ask you to answer it as briefly as you can, still addressing the topic. Okay. Okay, so this is to Jamie. Jamie, what strategies do you use to deal with conflict?
Great question. Thank you so much. You know, conflict is not a frightening thing to me. The way conflict or frustration is expressed is something that I care about. And that's why I work so hard at trying to get accurate information out so people can make decisions. You know, as a classroom teacher, confrontation was about people talking about their needs. And aggression in confrontation is a whole nother thing. Aggression versus assertiveness is a whole other thing. Making matters personal, putting one more drop in the bucket of fear and hatred is inexcusable to me, and you will not see me participating in that in my campaign or as a leader. It is so important, and that we not shy away from the things that are uncomfortable for us. And I've got to tell you, the Indigenous Circle taught me so much about just shutting my mouth and listening and being part of rather than jumping into solution all the time. So do I think everyone has the right to say, hey, I have another idea? Absolutely. That's what makes us rich. That's what makes our community strong when we do it together. Confrontation and aggression paired with aggression means we're probably not going to listen to one another. Means I have just shut myself off to you, or you've shut yourself off to me. So I think if we can refrain from using that tool, we're a better community. And quite frankly, I've seen us do it time and time again. And I look forward to being part of that solution.
Thank you, Jamie. Paul, quickly.
Yeah, thank you. And well, I would like to say that, you know, it is our job of our elected leaders to be navigating these types of communications. It's one of the key things that elected leaders are to do. But a lot of time you need to let people vent. If you don't let them and they feel unheard, then people most of the time need to get their energy, their emotions out, so to clear our heads, and then we can sit down and really talk. And that takes a step of listening and recognizing people's emotions, and then going from there to come up with some logical steps to move forward. Now, I'll give you an example. So when I was teaching a first-year seminar at an AU, a bunch of 18-year-olds, I actually received the highest rating possible of a 5.0 with my student evals on specifically inclusive classroom that allows people's opinions to be heard. And this was actually a class where I was teaching the economics of abortion, gun safety, or gun laws, narco-terrorism, all kinds of stuff. That a lot of heated emotions. And it was also right in 2016 when Hillary and Donald Trump were, yeah. So it was heated discussions. And I actually sat down right after the election, the day after, and I said, all right, students, let's talk this out. And I said all the tables in a circle, and I said, let's talk this out. I am sorry at 18 years old that this is your experience, first experience in politics. This is not civil. This is not how we should be doing it. And I want to talk to you about it. So this is the kind of approach that I have to mitigate a lot of conflicts and have experience in doing so.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you to both of you all for your time and your thoughtful responses. Thank you for everybody who was watching. Thank you for the Democratic Party, the Coconino County Dems, who organized this. And I wish you a good day, and everybody pay attention and go out and vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.